We've discussed all the all the different things that a person needs to do to make stop motion, but how do you actually go about making the movie itself? Well, the key thing to remember about any stop motion movie is to have the thing that you're going to be working with. Transformers are excellent. There are a lot of really good Transformers stop motions out there, so you can use those as a primer to see what's possible, what's not. I personally like using Bionicles as well because they move around really well. The reason why I do this is because it reduces my investment of going out and buying a proper armature, which can cost anywhere from $200 or up, or sitting down and trying to manufacture one myself. Just trying to remember what the next thing I had to say was. So a few things to remember. Stop motion has a lot to do with the frame rate and the amount of information that you may be showing within a second. This can vary depending upon the type of movie that you're making. Sometimes it's really funny to show two action figures that are moving around very smoothly, but then all of a sudden you punch one guy and the next frame the guy's just lying down. The places where you can use that, again, use your story element, use your script element to decide how you want to change the frame rates around, if you want to change the frame rates around, because they give that effect that you're looking for. But having said that, generally speaking, it's good to have it's good to have a reasonable frame rate for any video that you're making. What I mean by frame rate is the number of frames that you're going to be showing within a second. So here's to just show you how this is going to happen. I have another camera over here, which I'm just going to start up. I'm going to place this guy right there. Actually, let's use this one because he's a little bit more sturdier. I'm going to place his arms down, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a few pictures of him. Now, all those things that I spoke about earlier on, the bumping, making sure the lighting is fine, because I'm also videotaping all of this and I have a limited duration of time to speak, I am not going to consider most of those things, but just concentrate on movement for the moment. So I'm going to move the camera closer to the action figure. Make sure the flash is off. You never want to work with the flash. And I'm going to take a picture of him. I'm going to move his arm a little bit. Notice how little I moved. There's a reason for that. I'm going to move it a little bit more. And I'm going to continue doing this for a bit. I didn't realize how boring this might get for people. But just trying to understand what I mean by people who just want to do this as a hobby. You don't want to go through the trouble of showing this level of detail in the movement of your characters. It's easy to do. It's easy to use lower frame rates, less amount of detail, and still get pretty much the same kind of effect that you are looking for. You don't always have to show your technical expertise at something, just your imagination. So I have no idea how many pictures I've taken so far, but the reason why I'm taking the reason why I'm taking so long to show this part of the exercise is how frame rate can actually affect what you're doing, and how the level of detail and the amount of information that you want to show over a period of 1 second is affected by it. So that's all I'm going to do. I probably took about 15 to 16 pictures right now. Now on a frame rate of about 16, let's say of 16 frames per second, showing the action figure's arm go from this point to this point looks very smooth. It's not, it may not have the desired effect. So what you have to remember is try to figure out how the action figure is going to move, how much time he requires to do a particular thing that you're trying to make him do. Basically, what that means is, let's say he's just moving his arm for no reason whatsoever. 16 frames for 1 second at 16 frames per second is not so bad. However, if this movement was part of something elaborate that you're trying to do, and in any normal day scenario, nobody is going to take this long to move their arm from here to here, well then 16 frames per second did not really work out. What you probably wanted to do was maybe just have this movement over 8 frames, and in that way his arm would have only moved in half a second and it would have looked much more realistic. More things to consider are, never use a low frame rate when you're trying to speed things up. Basically, what we just spoke about was 16 frames per second. Let's assume that this entire thing was done on 4 frames a second. Then it would have taken him 4 seconds to move this much. If we go down to 1 frame per second, which surprisingly we see a lot of those on YouTube, it would look horrible for the arm to just come up like that. So always keep in mind the type of the number of frames you want to show. Typically speaking, I encourage people never to use less than 4, because anything less than 4 and you're not going to get any, you won't be able to communicate much information to anyone, and more importantly, you are probably going to get the person who's watching your video extremely frustrated. I guess to sum everything up, the most important thing to consider is going to be is first to figure out what frame rate you want to work at. You want to work at 4, 8, which is very good because that's what Windows Movie Maker works at, which a lot of people use. And then decide how much time each one of your sequences is going to take. So let's say I wanted this action figure to roll around like this. Well, that looks pretty decent. That much amount of time is pretty good. And let's say that took about 1.5 seconds to do. At 8 frames per second, I need to have the entire thing done in 12 frames. So you want to move them around. You want to move them along evenly, or you may want to stress at certain things. It's a little bit difficult sometimes to make the character bend down, so it's just going to fall over. So at this point, what you do is you probably want to take 1 frame, 2 frames, maybe move him down all the way. Use his hands as leverage if you feel like to keep him up. 3 frames, but concentrate more on the rollover. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And when you do this really quickly, it's going to look very decent. You could do if you were working at, let's say, 24 frames per second, which a lot of professional videos are done on, then you're looking at 36 frames to convey all of the information. When you're doing 24, remember one thing, that you never want an object going from here all the way there really quick. You want to show a lot of transition frames that are taking place, because the higher frame rate that you sometimes go at, you don't want the object to look like it's jerking around. I'm just trying to think of what else to consider while doing these things. I'm going to do another exercise where I am going to take 4 pictures and hopefully do a narration on that, and give you guys an impression of what it is to do something at 4 frames per second, 8 frames per second, not showing too many frames, different types of frames during that time span. It should give you guys a really good understanding of how these things work.